Okay, everyone, so this is our 10th class. We only have one more class in Engineering 5, and today is geared towards engineering employment and professionalism, which includes ethics and social justice in engineering. So actually, Julia is my husband's niece, so it's my niece, who I've known for a long time, and I'm really proud of her. She went to community colleges in the Bay Area, then went to UC Berkeley, got her bachelor's degree in chemical engineering, and then decided to go on for a PhD in engineering education. So she knows way more stuff than me now. And she went to Purdue University in Indiana, which is one of the maybe about 10 schools that have PhDs in engineering education. And so rather knowing a lot about each field of engineering, she knows more about like how we should be teaching engineering. And she's now working at University of San Francisco. So I'm psyched that she's in the area, living up in the city. And so Julia's here with us until 12. She was able to give us some time, and she's going to cover the topic of social justice in engineering. So Julia, take it away.
Thanks so much. That was, I feel all warm and fuzzy because of the introduction. And I want to just kind of do a shout out to Joanne, like mostly that you guys are incredibly lucky to have this advocate like on your back, right? Like she will utilize her as much as possible. She has like the powerhouse to like help you in your career forward and like solidify engineering. I'm an engineer because of her. And I think you guys are at a very good school and in good hands. In that regard, I want to talk today about how technology impacts our culture, and kind of implicit with that is also your responsibility to engage in technology and to think through technology when you're creating it, when you're analyzing it, working with it, to see what type of culture do we want to create and how the technology we make is a representation of that. And I want to start off actually with thinking through what technologies deeply impact the way we experience the world. And so I want, so think about in your own life a technology and go ahead and put it in the chat. And I'm going to give one example first. And I want to think about warm running water and how amazing it is to have clean water in a faucet that is just on a tap. Like that technology saves lives, it saves time every day. And so many places in the world, right? Like people have to walk for hours a day to get water that's not necessarily clean. And if you actually want to cook on it, you have to like burn wood, and the engineering brilliance and infrastructure that has gone into making that in terms of water treatment plants, civil engineering, putting up the pipes, the mechanical engineers to design the water tanks and the fuel process. And from the chemical engineering perspective, I mean, chemical engineers do a lot of things with tanks, so there's like stuff in there. So go ahead and think about a technology in your own life that has really impacted the way you live, and go put it in the chat. So we have cellular, refrigeration is a huge one. Soap, detergent, keeping sanitation, that's right now in COVID, heaters, being able to be in all these different climates in the world. The internet, having so much information at our fingertips. These are all different huge technologies that kind of impact what we can do. Do I have screen sharing abilities? Yes, I do. And so what we want to talk about today, kind of going from building off of that, is we want to talk about the politics that are embedded in these technologies. And when I say politics, I don't mean Democrat and Republican politics that you might be hearing about. We want to talk about the politics actually as an arrangement of power and authority in human associations. And so essentially, like right now, society has given me the power in this classroom dynamic to decide what we talk about, right? Not everyone has the authority to decide the topics of today. You might have the government creates stop signs, and that stop sign creates a society to allows you to create a certain type of order and function. So it's not like power and authority is bad necessarily, but to actually recognize how these authority is embedded into these technologies. Now, historically, there's been this idea that technology is neutral, but it's the people that actually engage with the technology that creates negative. And so you might have heard the term, guns don't kill people, people kill people. And this idea is that it's not the gun or the physical item that creates the negative impact of our society, but it's actually society that takes the technology and turns it into this item that can be used for war. And so every once in a while, there's like this notion of a very important paper, and it's called a seminal paper in terms of research. And the winner article that I sent out, that hopefully you were able to watch the video, this was considered a seminal paper in the field. And it basically, the seminal paper changed the discussion of what like philosophers and a lot of engineers and such were thinking about technology. So before, they kind of thought of it as neutral, and kind of simplifying it here. But now there is more discussion about the fact that, so like a stop sign is a great example. It's like, well, you can look at a stop sign and you can choose to stop or not. And that is when a person in society has control. But where are examples that actually the control is within the technology and not with the person's decision? And so he brought up a lot of different examples. And one of them is this bridge that is this physical bridge that currently exists that goes into Long Island. And the person, Moses, that designed it, he was racist. And it's very clearly documented, he did not want poor people and people of color coming in Long Island. And so luckily, in his own mind, he thought, well, how do I separate and prevent these people from coming into the island? I'm going to make a bridge that's physically too small for buses to go under. And therefore, only people that have cars, and in New York, only wealthy people were able to have cars because public transit was so easily accessible. And essentially what he was able to do is separate poor people from wealthy people. And in that, there was the race separation as well, because of historical income inequalities that are associated with race. And so this is one specific example, but we can actually see it in our like day-to-day lives. And so we can look at specifically artifacts, or artifacts in this case is kind of interchanged with technology, but also like any item that can have power. So how do these items have power in a classroom? And so we can look at a classroom that's designed in a huge lecture hall. Can you see this okay, Duran? Should I actually make it more present? Okay.
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, that's great. That's great. That's better.
Yeah. So here we have this huge lecture hall, right? And it's very clear by the design that the lecturer is the person that's getting to decide how learning is done and who's being done. Like if you wanted to do group works where people like started talking and discussing, it would be physically hard in this space. Also, where you are in this lecture hall will very much determine your experience in it, right? So like if you're sitting in the back, like it's shown on the right, you'll be very far away from the center of attention versus if you were right up close to the lecture. Now here are two different examples with different kind of classrooms. You can see by the organization, their learning might be done in a lot of different ways. You can have self-directed learning. You can have a teacher with a presentation, but the teacher, it's designed so the teacher can go around the room. You can have teamwork, and so the physical design impacts the classroom design. I'm gonna take a second. Can I have a couple thumbs up if you're getting where I'm going? Okay, sweet. Awesome. Okay, so here we have, this is the classroom that's a very common design in graduate level spaces where you actually, like if you're going to do a reading, like a lot of my PhD classes were in a classroom that looked like this. We all kind of read the same book, and then we just kind of had large discussions to talk about it. And so the physical space matters in how the learning happens. And so we want to then look at specific technologies and explore the authoritarian and democratic values. And so again, we're not kind of looking at the more like this authoritarian isn't maybe what you normally think of authoritarian and democratic. Authority means you have a small central government of control that decides the rules versus the large base of people that decide society rules. And so in authoritarian technologies, you have nuclear power is a really great example, because you need to, in order for the actual system to function, you have to have clear rules. You have to be localized because it generates so much power in one single space. And you're going to have a few people that are controlling the system in order to be safe. It's going to be inherently unstable because if one thing happens, the whole society power can go down. And it's very powerful. And so here we also on the right have this large scale agriculture is very similar to this, right? You have a very small group of people that are determining the food for the whole society. Now we have democratic values and technologies. Solar panel and small or community or local farms are a great example of this. So man-centered, using the word man there, it's like individual-centered, let's actually say. They're not, you can't, like one solar power plant isn't going to provide enough energy for the whole city. But if you actually have it enough, you can actually create a grid that is distributive. Each one is going to be relatively weak, but if you actually have, when we have the situation that happened in Texas is a great example, like that was a more centralized system because it was isolated. You have a snowstorm, everyone's power gets locked out, but when you have it more distributed, other energy can come in and make up, and that's why it's more durable and resourceful. And similar with foods. And so kind of looking at the example of comparing nuclear and solar, you can see that there is inherent qualities in the technology itself that allow for different governmental societal structures to exist. And so in the paper, these are all the different ways that he kind of categorized ways technology would be. So here we have designs with political effects in a particular context. So you can design it so there's an intended political effect. There's a political effect with a bias towards a certain situation, or there's an unintended effect that isn't necessarily malicious, but it happens to come. And then we'll give examples in the next two slides, but I'm just going to talk through. And then there's inherent political technologies that require, and then technologies that are compatible. So in terms of designing with a political effect, so the Moses the bridge example to Long Island was a very clear intent. There was, when he was designing it, there was he wanted that separation of people. Then there's a bias. So the example in the middle is of a large food processing plant. And when they were actually designing the technology, they didn't think about, oh, we want to do away with small scales farming that reduces jobs for like agriculture workers, but they ended up doing it. But if you actually look at where the funding was coming from, how the government was situated, that is, there was the money behind it and the politics behind it that resulted in that technology to begin with. And then you have completely unintended, like you have a curb that doesn't have a ramp for someone who has a wheelchair. And so we're going back to this concept of authority. No one, like someone who's in a wheelchair cannot access this side of town because it's unsafe for them to be using their wheelchair and so they are physically unable, similarly to Moses with the unintended, that actually you couldn't get in through a bus, a person in a wheelchair couldn't get onto the sidewalk. And so there, even though the designer didn't maliciously think about it, it still had the same result. And there was also no funding and corporate backing to say, okay, we're going to prevent, or we're going to favor able-bodied people. And so the other example is the inherent political technologies. So there's a certain technologies that require social order, and the nuclear also fits into the required, but so does a ship. You can't run a ship without having a captain. Like if you're trying to create a democratic where everyone had power, equal power in a ship, it would be chaos. Like I'm not actually a boating person, but I think boating people would agree you need to have one person that can make the decisions in a case of an emergency in order to be safely traveling the seas. And then you have compatibility with technology. So you could have an authoritarian system with solar, like that is possible, but you can also have a democratic system where rules are made equally with solar. So it's more this compatibility element. So solar doesn't require a democratic system, but it's compatible with a democratic system. But like a ship requires an authoritarian system. Okay, so I just put a lot of information on you guys, right? And so I want you to spend some time to think about what technologies have you seen that have political impacts. Okay, so here we have a Google Doc. And so I'm putting this Google Doc in the chat, if I can. I'm just seeing the last, yes, roads, automobiles, and launching. Those are huge elements of that impact our lives. But I want everyone to go ahead and click the doc presentation form. And go ahead and find technologies and just do a Google image search and find pictures. If you can think about, and we'll take a few minutes. And what I want you to do is edit this document and actually copy and paste pictures in the intended categories and the unintended categories. So find pictures of examples with technologies with intended political impacts and unintended political impacts.
Julia, could we put in things that had good impacts?
Yes,
Like
absolutely.
we could put in one where we show a crosswalk with a curb that has um I don't know what it's called either.
The ramp.
The ramp, right?
Yeah,
So we could put some good things in too, right?
absolutely.
Okay.
Let's go. Stop sharing for a second. We'll just give you some time
Okay.
to work on this.
Thanks.
Let's do one more minute and then we'll start talking about these. These are awesome examples, you guys. Okay. Go ahead. Like everyone has access to this file anyway, so let's go ahead and kind of look at what we got. So this is the intended consequences. I'm kind of, so like, I feel like some of these are there's a very clear, like this very happy, excited woman has access to the van. A blind man has a ramp. That we have infrastructure that's taking into account of pedestrians and creating safe bikeways. I'm kind of curious about this electric system. Does someone want to, who put the electricity system?
Oh, hi. I was the one that put the electric thing in.
Can you
And,
share, yeah, what you were thinking?
yeah, I was thinking like it was, since it's like supposed to help a lot of people get like electricity, it fit the role.
Yeah, so it's like the government put up this electric grid so that now the access to electricity is there.
Yeah.
Yes, great. And then who put these spikes underneath the freeway? Yes. Can you explain what you were thinking with that?
I just thought because the government just wants to get rid of homeless people from that area.
Yeah. So it's like this government, the infrastructure to prevent people from sleeping underneath freeways.
Yeah, more specifically the city from getting like too many homeless people in the area.
Yep, these are all great of ways designs have created intentional impact on societies. And here we have some more. Gated communities. I'm curious what put the food and what you were thinking about that.
I put the fast food in, and I've heard the notion that fast food was a way to sort of, kind of weaken the dietary standards of marginalized cultures.
That's a big one. So like this intended, like focusing on how can we, yeah, there's a lot to unpack with that one, right? Is because food is connected to health, which is connected to resources. And yeah, thank you. Who put the Project Maven?
That was also me.
What else were you thinking of that, Cody?
Big Brother.
Okay. I could see you have a lot of, you think in very big systems. That's awesome. And then we have surveillance cameras and a person attempting to sleep on a bench. A lock, which definitely can prevent access. Gates. Ooh, who put, was this also you, Cody, the wall?
Good call. That is also me, the Berlin Wall, yes.
Yes. And who put water management?
That was me.
Yes. Adam, what were you thinking with the water management?
Well, with water management, mostly because it was more authoritative and centralized. And with the political impact, there could be, similar to farming and agriculture, incentives behind governments to either improve or not improve the water management system, which could have an unintended or very much intended impact to the local community because everyone will rely on this one area for the source of clean running water.
Yes. And who put in plastic straws?
Oh, that was me.
Yes, Liz. What are you thinking with the plastic straws?
So I was actually thinking unintended, but as we were talking, I realized that everything kind of has an intended and unintended um,
Yeah.
political impact.
So were you thinking about like the waste of plastic straws?
Yes, I was thinking about the unintended, like environmental,
Yeah.
political, backlash that came along with that. But if we're talking about intended political impact, we can talk about safer driving while you're drinking on the road, or the yeah.
Yeah, so there was a very clear intended impact, which is to have ease of drinking, like in moving, but then there's also the unintended impact, which is the environment. Yes. Yeah. I'm like, I think you got it. Good. Okay, and so then we can kind of design for unintended, but what is the person thinking with the unintended impact of virtual reality? What are you guys? Who?
That was me again.
Cody.
And just that it's a limited resource, that it's not accessible to everyone. It's got a high price, it's a high price ticket item. And, I just see that sort of technology, along with cellular technology. I actually put all three of these in,
Okay.
to be honest. Sort of all three of them are sort of, they're not intentionally, but they do somehow are sort of scripted into an elitist system.
Okay, so like the element of access of resources in terms, it's an interesting, because like I feel like there's been so many, especially with cell phones, unintended, like the person who designed the cell phone in the beginning, there's a lot of things that's coming up, especially in terms of surveillance, like the question about like, are the cell phones listening to you? Resources, yes. And I mean, so I spent about 6 months living in South Africa. And the pushback I would have for that, like, there's this thing about this term in South Africa referred to as farmer phones. And those are very like $20 phones, because the people who are farmers are usually the poorest, and that's the phones that they would use. But people in the urban areas, you didn't have to be making much to have a really good quality phone. And you would get a phone before you would get a laptop. And it's because phones were just so critically important to how people live and manage in South Africa. And that even you didn't have to be very wealthy. You wouldn't have a car. You might still have like your roof, like the quality of your house might not be very great, but you would have a good phone like that. It's this element of priority of where you want to spend your money. And usually phones are one of the first things you get, just to kind of push back with that. I love these explanations here. Who wrote these explanations out? I'm kind of curious.
I wrote for I unintentionally wrote CFS instead of CFCs, but I wrote the fluorofluorocarbons. So I decided I accidentally had a duster remover, and I just thought, oh, that's a good idea, because canned gas used to have this chemical that was unintentionally causing the depletion of the ozone layer, and I just thought it was something that was unintentional, and so yeah.
So this CFC is, it was part of technology, a lot of different technologies, and it was a huge ozone depletion.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
And then
then,
I did the microwave,
yeah,
Joanne. Just that I know it was not designed for the kitchen. It was designed, that technology was designed for military or defense. And I might have spelled defense wrong.
yeah,
But I've been being in New York, I've been in small places where there's very small kitchens, and a microwave is very beneficial. So I'm thinking that it's kind of nice that even if you have a small living area, you could still cook stuff.
yeah. So it opens up like all these food possibilities that wouldn't be acceptable if you didn't have like a space for a whole. So, and then we have nets and fishing. Yeah, and like the unintended consequences of what it's doing to the oceans. Well, I mean, I think we've been able to go through the general theme, and it sounds like like everyone's kind of on board and gets this primal notion about like how technology does impact and have inherent biases and kind of not like biases, yes, but that's actually not what I'm saying. Inherent political natures, and it can allow people to do certain things and create. It can open doors or it can shut them. There is inherent nature of technology that creates power and possibilities. And so I think the most relevant piece about this with engineers and social justice going forward is thinking about that responsibility in what you put, I like to call your life energy. You're going to make choices about where you work and what fields you want to go into, and recognizing that your work and the technology you build has these impacts on our culture and in our society. And so you can, when you're making things, but also when you're making choices on what you want to work on, to think through how your values align with the world you want to create, and making sure that you're adding to technologies that align with the things you care about. So that's what I want to kind of, how I see these things adding forward. Does anyone have any other questions or thoughts? Okay. Well, thank you so much for your guys' time. I'm going to bow out at this time.
Hey, Julia, before you go, thanks so much, because this is a really important area in engineering. And I think that you have so much knowledge in this area, and that's what you're bringing to the University of San Francisco, where they're just starting an engineering program. Julia is also involved a lot with service learning. So like abroad programs and programs where engineers are designing things for the community. And I just think that that's such an important element of engineering. And I'm really appreciative that you've gotten so much experience in that area and you bring that to the table. And thanks for bringing it to our table.
Well, thanks for inviting me. Yeah, this was fun. It was great to do it.
Okay, well, thanks a lot, Julia.
Okay,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Yeah.
Okay,
Bye.
bye.
Goodbye.
So if you guys don't mind, open up, your cameras so that I could see you. You don't have control of what you're going to design something for a company that has an intended purpose. So maybe you design some kind of conveyor system. Your conveyors are used a lot in chip manufacturing. So you might design this amazing conveyor system. And then in the end, 10 years out after you designed it, it might be used for something that you really wouldn't have wanted the conveyor belt to be used for. So you can't always control what your technology that you design is going to be used for in the future, but at least you could think about it for the current thing. Like Julia said, you have a choice, and I've mentioned this before, you could choose, and Sarah last week mentioned it, you could be a mechanical engineer in the military if you want, you could be a mechanical engineer in the food production, you could be a mechanical engineer in making prosthetics for people. You get to choose, but I don't want you to get all stressed out with, well, every time I make this technology, I don't know what it's going to be used for. You really can't control that. Does that make sense?
I think absolutely. I think that just sort of goes to the broader point of humanity, there really isn't something that you can create that cannot be used both negatively and positively. There's very few inventions that have, like the scythe for cutting down wheat and whatnot, that, that's been used as a weapon. There's many farm tools that have been used for weapons. If you're venturing into the field of creationism, of creating new objects and new items for technology, then there is a risk that it might be used unintentionally. I mean, look at Einstein and the creation of the splitting of the atomic atom, right?
Yeah, actually, there was a math teacher at Cabrillo that I met when I first started teaching at Cabrillo in the mid-90s. And he was a physicist and mathematician that was asked, very brilliant man, asked to work in Los Alamos in New Mexico at the place where they designed the atomic bomb. And most of those scientists and engineers didn't know what they were designing, although the people who hired them knew. And when the atomic bomb did go off in Hiroshima, and these scientists and engineers learned that what they were working on was just that, a number of them committed suicide. And he was still feeling the guilt and the repercussion from what he did. So I think what you can do is look at what you're designing and what the intended purpose is and decide whether you want to do that or not. But you can't look ahead and say, oh, well, it may be used for something, so I'm not going to do it. Does that make sense? Okay, so that's bringing us into ethics. And I don't know, maybe you'd like to have a 10-minute break right now? Does that sound good? Yeah.
Sure.
Okay, so it's 2 minutes to 12. How about come back at, let me just send it to everyone. Come back at 12:10.
Thank you, Joanne.
Yeah. Does anybody have any questions for me? Okay, I'm gonna go get some water then. I'll be right back. I'm back.
Hi, Joanne, I have a quick question for you.
Yeah, go for it.
So I was noticing on my grades
Oh, yeah,
that
thank you for asking me now. Yeah, I have time. Okay, tell me about the grade.
for week 8 participation, I think that was the one where I forgot his name. I'm sorry.
So
But
this
anyways,
wait, is this week 9?
this is week 10.
Okay, so week 9 I taught. So week 8 was Carl.
It was Carl. So that hasn't been graded yet. I was just curious if I didn't get a grade.
Oh, no,
or-
let me check. My guess is that he probably hasn't put the grades in yet.
No worries. I just wanted to double check.
Yeah, let me just check. Yeah, nobody's in.
Okay, great.
Nobody has their
Okay.
grade in yet.
Then I won't worry about it.
Yeah, don't worry about it. Sorry about that.
No worries.
He's had a lot of stuff going on. So yeah. But that is interesting because if you don't have a grade, then you wonder, is it that he gave me a 0 or, I could see what you're saying.
Exactly. Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
I won't worry about it any further though.
Yeah, no, don't. And I'll make sure I'm going to be the one doing the final grading. So if I see anything that's not graded, I will check in with Priti and Carl and get it done. What other questions do you guys have for me?
Hey Joanne, I did have this concern. So it was I think this has to do with more like ethics than social justice. It
Okay.
was about Neuralink. You
Say
know
it again.
the Neuralinks?
Say it again.
Neuralinks. It's a system that's used for it's Elon Musk invented this thing. It's this technology for being able to keep memories and
Oh,
transplant them into the brain. So I think this is more like ethics than social justice. I'm not sure.
well, we're going to go on to the
Yes.
discussion of ethics now.
Okay.
And then maybe we could distinguish between the two. They are
Okay, perfect.
interrelated somewhat, but the professional ethics is more about following codes. Like, so what Julie was talking about with Robert Moses, the guy who totally designed Long Island, and by the way, Long Island's in New York. They don't, actually, I didn't even know that idea about him, but it makes sense. So that in case was really a social justice thing because he was following the Uniform Building Code and building bridges, right?
Yes,
He
yes.
built a sound bridge according to the codes and ethical. He made it, the idea of ethics is about safety for people. So he followed engineering ethics, as you'll learn, but it was a social justice piece that he wasn't really giving a shit about.
Yes.
So this thing with Elon Musk, I don't even know about it yet. Maybe could you put a little link in the chat?
Yes.
And maybe so I could read about it later. But I imagine, again, as long as it's safe, if people are safe, then it is following engineering ethics. The social justice piece means, is it really helping people or not? I'm gonna just move for a minute to close a door. Hang on. So I think what you're referring to is probably ethics, but we'll find out.
Yes, it was just a little question because I do read a lot about like technology and stuff. So this was something interesting because I did want to talk about in social justice, because it's something that's eventually going to well, they're working on it, so it's eventually going to come into subject.
Is it good for people with Alzheimer's?
I'm not sure. It's still not out. They're still investigating. But it's supposedly to help with memories. I'm not sure if it will possibly be used for Alzheimer's or
Okay.
dementia even. I'm not sure.
Okay, I just found it's a brain implant the size of a $4 coins
Mhm.
with more than 1,000 electrodes that will allow a person to wirelessly send neuroelectric activity to anything digital, from prosthetic arms to Tesla autopilots to memory recording. So,
Yes.
so I'm saying when I read this, I could see
Mhm.
good uses for it and bad uses for it, right?
Yes.
But in terms of engineering ethics, as long as it's safe for people, this implant is actually safe for people to put in their brains. It's following engineering ethics. And then I don't know if it's going to result in social justice or not.
Yes. Yeah, that was a concern because I wanted to focus more on brain functions because a lot of people were saying that it could possibly be used to manipulate the brain.
Oh, yeah.
So that was the main concern that I had. So yeah.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Mhm.
And when I think about, it makes me think about the whole prosthetics and I think maybe Priti showed you the video, I'm not sure. But, prosthetic limbs are very, very, very expensive, like tens of thousands of dollars.
Yes.
And nowadays we can make prosthetics with 3D printers. So
Mhm.
it's really cheap. So certainly 3D
Yes.
printers have provided, I guess this could have been provided a really great opportunity for people who are poor, like children who are poor that are born without their fingers, their digits, to have these 3D printed parts. Did she show you a video on that?
I think she showed us a video. I can't remember
Okay,
exactly.
I'm gonna write this down because I want to
Mhm.
make sure that we show this video in the future. Enable. There's a company called, an organization called Enable that makes 3D printed parts for kids so that they have fingers. And that's a real great social justice example.
Mhm. Yes.
Thanks for
I think
asking
she
me.
did.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I don't know enough about it yet.
Yeah, no worries. It's barely new technology, and I think it's something like how he said. It's probably going to evolve into like more a social thing than it is right now. But yeah, I
Yeah,
totally
I
get
don't
it.
know.
That's
Yeah. Okay, we're at 12:30, so I'm going to continue now. So I'm going to share my screen. And I got to tell you, when I don't see faces and I just see your names there, sometimes I wonder if you're there. And I really hope that everybody's getting all this information from us. But I would love to see faces. So anyway, I'm going to share my screen. And I'm going to our course module. And today is class 10, April 8th, and it's all about engineering employment and professionalism, including statistics, post-college options, licensing, ethics, and social justice. So since Julia only had time to meet with us before 12 o'clock, I had social justice go first. And then we're going to just segue into talk about ethics and the code of ethics. We'll look at technical societies, and then we're going to look at a case study of Citicorp. Then we're going to talk about professional licensing and other things you could do with your engineering degree. And then we're going to end up looking at statistics and employment. So that's our focus for today. So I'm going to go into the ethics. Oh, so looking at social justice rather than me opening, I've already opened up all the screens. So here is the engineering social justice, which I actually sent to you a couple of days ago. So this is the full article she was talking about, and this was the video. So I really would go back and watch this video if you haven't. So again, where it is, it's the social justice first link. Now we're going into the ethics. And I'm gonna open up this document. So let me move our photos and let me make this bigger. So engineering ethics. So, when we talk about, well, what is ethics? We could say, and if I asked you guys, you might say the moral right and wrong, your moral duty, your obligation, how we treat each other. That's all about personal ethics. That's what we as an individual choose to do. Do we steal? Do we not steal? But what we're really talking about today is professional ethics. It's the principle of conduct governed by an individual or group, moral decisions made by engineers in the course of doing their engineering job. And the decisions are often made at the organizational level, not the personal level. So when we talk about engineering ethics, we're talking about, okay, not us as a person, but us as an engineer, being a certain kind of engineer and working for a certain company, we have to have some ethics in what we design. And the reason why is because we as engineers understand technology. The common person does not. And I think you know that now from the whole idea of science versus no science. There are many people in the country who really don't even understand what science is. So you understanding science and technology, people are going to be relying on you, just like the vaccines. The common person is relying on engineers and scientists to make vaccines that are safe for people, because we have the technical expertise and the science background, and they have many times nothing. So why do we teach ethics? Well, ABET, remember ABET is the organization that rates schools. They mandate that every student who gets a bachelor's degree in engineering has taken ethics. And you're going to see ethics a number of times, not just in this class. We often encounter ethical dilemmas, and you may have, just as a worker at McDonald's, where you dropped a bunch of French fries on the floor and your boss looks at you and decides, does he want you to pick it up or can you throw it out? Right? So in the course of a job, you're going to have to make ethical decisions. And then values, we really have to, we're not born with a set of values. We really have to develop values as we get older. And then many things that are legal are unethical. Okay. So that's why we're learning it. And think about this. Can a person have respectable personal ethics yet poor business ethics, or the reverse? Sure. Okay. So not only when we report as an engineer at an engineering company, we have to put on our engineering ethical hat when we make decisions. And the code of ethics is set forth by the professional societies like IEEE, professional engineering side, also companies. This is Hewlett Packard. This is IBM. So not only are code of ethics set by the professional societies and organizations, but also by companies. And the purpose of the codes is to provide a framework for ethical judgment in a professional setting, express rights, duties, and obligations of members of the profession, and describe the opinion of correct behavior. Okay, and I'm going to sum it up in one sentence in a little bit. So what's interesting though, is that we are problem solvers. So we have to decide, well, how are we going to go about making a decision when we're posed with an ethical dilemma? Okay. And I'm going to stop here for a moment. I'm going to go back out and I'm going to go to a different slide. I'm going now from the ethics presentation in the code of ethics. Okay, let's see, it's this one. Yeah. Okay, so let me make this bigger and so for instance, there's a society called the National Society of Professional Engineers. And professional engineers are engineers who have a license. I have a civil engineering license. Priti has a civil engineering license. Phaedra has a civil engineering license. And then I know engineers who have a mechanical engineering license or an electrical engineering license. So we are what are referred to as professional engineers. And I'm going to talk about licensing in a little bit. But this is the code of ethics for engineers through the Society of Professional Engineers. And now can you read where it says fundamental canyons? Can everybody read that, or is that still too small?
Yes.
It's
Okay, look at 1.1. That is what we are all about when we're engineers. We hold paramount the safety, health, and welfare of the public in the performance of their, engineers hold paramount the safety, health, and welfare of the public in the performance of their professional duties. That is what we are supposed to do. When you get an engineering degree and you start working as an engineer, you are telling the public that you are going to be concerned about their safety. Because again, they don't know anything about technology. And you are designing things, bridges, buildings, aircraft, et cetera, everything to make sure that they're safe. Okay? Look at 2. Engineers perform services only in their area of competence. They issue public statements only in an objective and truthful way. And they act in professional manners for each employer or client as a faithful agent and trustee. And they avoid deceptive acts of solicitation like bribes. If you're an engineer, you don't take bribes to hire some kind of contractor. You don't take bribes to put in a certain, hire a certain kind of welder or something. You don't take bribes. So if you look in the code of ethics for any engineering discipline, you're going to see these same 5 canyons. And as you look on, this is 2 pages long and you could read it later. It talks about breaking these things down in detail. But basically, does everybody understand that you are designing things that can hurt people, and therefore you have to be responsible and make sure that it doesn't hurt someone? And one way we do that in engineering is when you do a design, you have it reviewed by other peers, other engineers in the company, by your bosses, so that they could check your mistakes. Okay? So that's what engineering ethics is all about. And now to go back to that slide where it says, wouldn't it be nice if we had a way of determining once we're in an ethical dilemma, how we respond? And I went to a conference once, and the person who was speaking was talking about just that. And this is what the person handed out. And I thought it was awesome, totally awesome, because sometimes you get stuck and you don't know what to do. You don't know what decision to make. So let's take a look at this. So, state a problem. There's something about this decision that makes me uncomfortable. Or do I have a conflict of interests? Okay, so there are going to be times that you're making a decision to have one type of conveyor belt versus another. And one kind of conveyor belt is kind of making you a little uncomfortable. You want to think about it, decide whether it's going to be safe. Or conflict of interest, like Cabrillo College has a conflict of interest. I cannot hire my cousin who's a contractor to build a building at Cabrillo. In fact, Cabrillo cannot hire someone who is related to me because that's a conflict of interest. Okay. All right. So number 1 is you as an engineer are in a situation, and we're going to look at a case study. So I'm going to give you a really good example. So you're in a situation where you're designing something and you have a couple of options of design and something's making you uncomfortable. There's something about a design that you think may not be safe. And you're trying to decide whether you should do option A design or option B design. So the next thing after you become uncomfortable is you check all the facts. You have to look at all your facts. And this is just like in the engineering design process that Priti taught to you. Many problems disappear upon closer examination of a situation, while others change radically. Maybe option A, once you do research, you find out that the option A conveyor belt actually does pinch fingers. So you decide, okay, I'm not going to do that one. I'm only going to go with option B. Or maybe you learn that option A and option B are both okay. So once you check facts, you may not have an ethical dilemma anymore. Okay, then you have to identify the facts. Who's involved, what laws, what's the codes, practical constraints. For instance, there's something referred to as the Uniform Building Code in civil engineering. Uniform Building Code is the book. It's a thick book that specifies all the different kind of requirements for any kind of building. and something you could imagine, I think you could understand this. If you live in a 1-story house or a 2-story house, don't you think a 2-story house that has more weight needs a thicker foundation or a deeper foundation? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, so in the Uniform Building Code, you look up what kind of soil, whether it's a 1-story house or a 2-story house, and it'll specify the exact type of foundations you can have. Okay, so, and this exists in all other fields too, not just civil engineering. So you need to look at all the different codes. And then you need to develop a list of options. What can I do? Okay, and then I think number 5 is really helpful. I think it's really helpful. Listen to this. When you're looking at 2 different designs, does one option versus the other do less harm than any alternative? So it's called a harm test. Look at the that's hard for me to say, publicity test. This is a big one. Would I want my choice of this option published in the newspaper? Think about that. If you were designing something in Santa Cruz County and you think that it might fail and you decide to build it anyway, and then it fails, would you want that published in the paper? Probably not. It would ruin your reputation, right? So that's going to help you make a decision on which option you choose. Defensibility. Could I defend my choice of this option before a congressional committee? Reversibility. Would I still think the choice is a good option if I were one of the adversely affected? Let's say a bridge collapsed and I was under the bridge, or my family member was under the bridge. Would I have felt that that was the appropriate bridge to build? I'm using a lot of civil engineering examples because civil engineers are the ones that design things where a lot of people's lives are at stake. And civil engineers are the ones that become licensed. And again, we're going to talk about licensing and as an engineer. But a lot of, one computer blows up or a few computers blow up isn't such a big deal. But if one bridge collapses, it's a big deal.
I'm always reminded by that because as a carpenter and as a builder, I build things also along those same lines. I don't want anything that I build to fail and hurt somebody.
Right.
But I'm always in the back of my mind, I think about that balcony where a bunch of foreign exchange students were at a house party and they all went out on a balcony that really wasn't designed to hold the 15 people or so that they put out there, and it collapsed and a lot of them died.
Yeah. So that tells you that you always have to over design things. Maybe that balcony, realistically, maybe 4 people should have been on it, but you don't design it for 4 people. You design it for 30 people. You over design things. And it's called a factor of safety. And you're going to experience that in your junior and senior level classes. And we'll be talking about it in statics, which you'll take at Cabrillo at some point. Colleague test. What do my colleagues say when I describe my problem and suggest an option? Professional test. What might my professional governing body or ethics committee say about this option? Organizational test. What does the organization ethics officer or legal counsel say about it? So when you have an ethical dilemma, you are going to get all the facts and you're going to think about a bunch of things. And part of the thinking is also talking to colleagues and talking to your professional society and determine whether they think it's okay too. And then you're going to make a choice. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing for a moment. So when we talk about engineering ethics, we're talking about us as engineers who have the technical and the math and science background have to make sure that we're designing things that are safe for people. And we are going to, probably in our lifetime, experience an ethical dilemma. And that is a great design process to use to figure out how to go about it and whether to do that, choose that option or not. Okay. I'm going to go on to the case study now. So I'm going back to our modules. Okay, social justice, code of ethics. Next is the professional societies, and I have a link on here. It's on the engineering department page of all the different technical societies, and you're kind of comfortable with this already. You probably from your homework have looked at one of these, but all these different technical societies have codes of ethics, and all these societies also have lawyers on staff. So you could always call the Society of Plastics Engineer and ask for a lawyer and talk to that lawyer about your dilemma. Okay. Go back to, I'm going to go to the City Core now. So some of you might use Citibank. You might have a Citibank credit card. That's Citicorp. And you've probably seen the New York skyline before. This is the Empire State Building. This is the Chrysler Building. This is the UN, United Nations building. And this building that has the roof, a slanted roof is called the Citicorp building. So you probably have seen this in the New York, a picture of a postcard or something before. And this is the bottom of the Citicorp building. So the Citicorp building is a square building. What is really interesting about this building is instead of having the columns on the corners, the four corners, notice, where do you see the columns here?
In the center of the perimeter.
Right, the sides. Basically, this building is built, for one, it's built on what you might want to say is stilts, right? It's built on stilts. These are columns that are supporting the building. But when you typically see buildings that are built on columns, the columns are in the corner, not on the sides. So this was a very innovative design at the time. All right, so now I have a video of me. So I'm going to just show my video for a minute, okay? So it was a little bit of a surprise for you guys. Hey everyone, I am still in New York visiting my mom. And since today's lesson is on engineering ethics, there's this really great case study about the Citicorp building. So I went into Manhattan today so that you could see what the Citicorp building looks like. Okay, and then there's the second video. Okay, everyone, so you see the black car. Behind the black car to your left, you see a building, a smaller building that's a concrete block building, or maybe stone block. And if I zoom in at the entrance, you'll see that the name there says St. Peter's Church. So basically, St. Peter's Church owned this block, and a building wanted to go in, the Citicorp building. And so I want to show you the Citicorp building is the tall building, this one here, and you notice the column of the building is actually not on the corner of the building. Instead, it's on the side, and you'll notice to the right in the back, you'll see another column. All these columns are in the middle of the sides of the building, not in the corners. And the reason for this is because the church really wanted to have an airy feel underneath. And I'm just going to go up high. I don't know if you can tell from this view, but the Citicorp building is the one that has a diagonal cut at the top. And I'll show you another picture of that. But it's important to tell you the story for you to actually visually see what's going on with this building. Okay, talk to you in a minute. Oops, okay, everyone. Sorry. Okay, so now, could everybody see my screen? So it shows the skyline, right? Okay, and then it shows you a photo of the building and then the two videos of me. And then here is the complete story. So I want to tell you the story, okay? So, I mean, we could open this, but let me just tell you the story. So basically the church owned this part of the block, this city block, and the Citicorp wanted to build, and the church definitely wanted this airy feel. So the building was not allowed to start down at the sidewalk. It had to start up high. And because of the location, they wound up putting the columns on the sides instead of the corners, so it didn't interfere with the church. And I'm going to stop sharing now because I would just rather talk to you. So again, if you don't mind showing your pit faces, that would be really nice. Okay, so the deal is that, and you're going to learn a little bit about construction, the process of construction too. So what happens is an engineer designs something, draws up all the plans. That's the first step. And the second step, the plans get given to a bunch of contractors and the contractors bid on it and a contractor is chosen. And then the contractor starts to build the building. And if the contractor wants to make any changes in the design, the contractor has to go back to the engineer for a change to ask, it's called a change order, to ask if it's okay to change. So in this particular case, the Citicorp building was designed with weld connections. And the contractor wanted to use bolts, B-O-L-T-S, nuts and bolts instead in some areas. So the contractor asked the engineer if they could use bolts, and the engineer redid all the calculations. And sure enough, the bolts were fine. So the engineer told the contractor, the bolts are fine. And the contractor continued building it. And then it was finished. The Citicorp building is standing, and the details in that article will tell you the time frame, but I don't know if it was 10 years later or whatever. The main engineer's name is, it looks like Les Mesure, but it's Les Mesure. It's a French name, but I'm just going to say Les Mesure because when you look for it, you're probably going to look for measure. So Les Mesure got a phone call from an engineering student. And the engineering student said, hey, you know, my professor told me that you should have used welds instead of bolts, and that this building is going to come down. So Les Mesure just said, oh yeah, whatever. But when he went away for the weekend, he started thinking more about it. And now I have to give you a little bit of background. I already mentioned the Uniform Building Code. It's a thick book that specifies how you build things. So think about it. If you have a building, I'm gonna hang on a second. Full screen. Okay, if you have gallery view. Okay, if you have a building, and a building normally has all the columns on the corner, the worst place for the wind to come in is when the wind comes from the side. So here's a side of a building. Here is a column, and here's the column. That means that this area, this corner of the building is very structurally sound. The worst wind would be if the wind came in the middle of the building. And the Uniform Building Code specified up to that point when the Citicorp building was built that you have to analyze wind and failure coming here. Because there was never a building that had the foundation actually in the center. Sorry, ignore my middle finger there. But in this case, because the columns were in the middle of the building, the worst wind is coming in at the corner, which is called quarter wind. But it wasn't designed using quarter wind because nobody thought of it. And the Uniform Building Code said, look at winds coming from the side. Well, this phone call made Les Mesure think about it. And he wound up that weekend running all the calcs with wind coming from the corners. And sure enough, he realized that if New York City, if Manhattan got a wind at a certain amount, that building was going to come down. So isn't this exciting? Okay, I find this exciting. So he's at a point now, he just realized that his design could fail. And he is posed with this ethical dilemma. And this is where I would start looking at the ethical dilemma sheet. What the hell do I do? You know, he has a few options. One, he could say nothing. He really could. He could say nothing because he followed the Uniform Building Code. And this was one student who called and said something. Nobody knows anything. He could have let it go. Now, you could think of personal ethics. Damn right, you're never going to let that go because you know when that building fails, you're going to probably kill yourself because a bunch of people died. But that could have been one of his options. Another option is come clean, right? So those were his two options. He decided he's going to come clean. But you can't just make a phone call and say the buildings are going to fail because you're just going to be, people are going to freak out. So what do you need to do as an engineer? He spent that whole weekend designing what he can do based on how it went in, how it was built, what modifications could he make to the design to make it safe. So he came up with a plan. Then who did he call? He called his company's lawyer. He happened to be the CEO of the company. He called his company's lawyer. He called his company's insurance company. And then they called Citicorp. So lay measure, his lawyer, his insurance company probably didn't come to the meeting. Maybe, I don't know. Citicorp CEOs, the board, their insurance people, their lawyers, they all came together and lay measure said, okay, I just realized that this building could fail in a couple of years. And this is what we need to do. And so what happens, I don't know if you know about insurance, but you know, you have homeowners insurance. So if an earthquake knocks, well, you have to have earthquake insurance now, but if something happens to your home, a fire, you have a fire, the insurance has to pay for it, right? Well, now there's this added expense in making these design modifications, right? So in order to make these design modifications, they're going to cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. Well, lay measure's insurance is going to cover it because he has insurance. And even though it's going to cost more to do the repair than he has insurance, Citicorp was fine. They said, we'll take your insurance money and we'll put our own money in and we'll make all the design modifications. So they cleared out the building. I don't know if it was for a week or a couple of weeks, but they cleared out the portions of the building that needed to be retrofitted. They fixed it. Everything was great. Two things that happened. One, that wind that would have failed the building did come through in the future. I don't remember how many years. That article I have there tells you all the details. And of course it didn't fail because of the changes. And two, I don't know if you know what insurance premiums are. Premiums are what you pay, what your parents pay every month if they own a house for their homeowners insurance. Automobile insurance, that's, you know, automobile insurance. Automobile insurance, the amount you pay your automobile insurance company every month or year, that's called your premium, right? The premium. His insurance, lay measure's insurance company decreased the amount of his insurance premium because they now knew how ethical an engineer he is. So isn't that effing cool? That is a great real story. And there are many stories. And some of the stories, I mean, this was ethically good. He made the right decision ethically, and we had a great outcome. Nobody died. But there are times that people make a poor ethical decision and people die. Or there are times that people do follow the building code and they do everything right and something happens and fails. But you as the engineer, you are responsible for safety of people. Could I give you another case study, but it's a shorter one? Okay,
Yes, please.
the Challenger disaster. Does everybody know what that is? I was in college when it happened. The Challenger disaster was the space shuttle that went up and blew
I was
up.
in the third grade, yeah.
You were in third grade. So some of you weren't born. 7 people died. One person that died was a teacher, Christine MacArthur or something. Okay, so what was that all about? So in the aerospace industry, you have NASA, right? You have the government, you know, NASA, right? NASA hires aerospace contractors like Lockheed to do their design. Most NASA doesn't do their own design. They do some of their own design, but they hire military contractors, defense contractors like Lockheed. Well, the engineer on this project designed the whole propulsion system. And remember, you know material properties. You know what an O-ring is? An O-ring is a seal, right? Like a washer, a rubber washer, an O-ring's made out of rubber. If you have a rubber band and you put it in the freezer, what happens to it when you pull it?
It's gonna crumble and break.
It's gonna break. Because a rubber band normally is elastic, but if you put it in the freezer, it's going to change its properties and it's going to become more brittle, which we covered in the materials section. So the Challenger, they were supposed to go off. They were supposed to have a, what do you call that? Takeoff. They were supposed to have a takeoff and they changed it for weather. They were supposed to have another takeoff and they canceled it for weather. There was going to be a third takeoff and it was going to be in colder weather conditions. And the engineers told NASA not to launch because the temperature was colder than the O-rings can handle, and the O-rings, being rubber, would be brittle and break and not keep the seal. And NASA decided to launch anyway. Fucking assholes. They should have listened to the engineers. And that engineer, now the engineer wrote a letter to NASA, like was pleading, his group was pleading with NASA not to go off. And there's this documentary and an interview with this engineer, and he, at the time of the documentary, he was still kind of a mess. Even though he did everything, he was ethical. He did everything he could to prevent the launch, but in the end, the owner, the client, gets to decide, and NASA decided. I don't think NASA will ever do that again. In fact, their space shuttle program isn't as perfect anymore, right? They don't have as many launches. Anyway, so in both situations, in the Citicorp building and in the Challenger disaster, both in situations were times where the engineers acted in an ethical manner, but one of them didn't have a good outcome because the clients didn't want to listen. I mean, Citicorp listened to him and said, Citicorp could have said, no, I'm sorry, we're not stopping business for 2 weeks to put in some welds or retrofit. We're not going to do it, you know, but then Citicorp would have had to take the liability. So Citicorp in that situation, even though they weren't engineers, they were also acting in an ethical manner and really caring about people. Okay. All right.
Jan,
Yes.
I went ahead and put the link into that article because I read that article as well
Oh,
on
thanks.
NPR, and I added the link to the chat.
Thank you. That's the article with the interview with the engineer on the Challenger, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Thanks, Cody. All right. I'm going to
Wait,
open up the
Joanne.
chat, and I want to see if you guys have some questions.
Wait, Joanne, did you get to read the book I told you?
I did not. Could you put it in the chat? What is it about, Ulysses? Ulysses, what's the article about? I mean, the book about? Oh, his audio died. Okay, just type it in the chat. There are many books out there on engineering ethics, and you're going to be taking, when you take engineering 10, you're going to be doing an ethical project, Ecabrio Engineering 10, if you take it. And then at your university, you're also going to have probably a full-blown ethics class. Oh, Why Things Break. It covered the Challenger disaster. Okay, any other comments on that? No? Okay, so I'm gonna keep going then. I'm gonna go back to sharing my screen. And so we did the social justice piece with Julia. I went over the ethics slides and showed you the code of ethics and decision-making. We looked at technical societies and we did the Citicorp. And now we're going on to professional engineering licensing. Okay, and before I show you the slides, hey, when you guys do you use the gallery view when I'm talking, or do you just have it so it's me talking? I mean, do you just see me?
I can see a handful of other
The
students.
gallery.
The gallery? Okay, if you want, what about now? I just pinned myself. Do you still see the gallery?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So if you want, you could just go to the upper right where it says view if you want to just see me or the person who's talking, and that's the speaker view, just in case you want to see me bigger. Okay, so professional engineering. So in order to be a lawyer, you have to pass an exam. Does anybody know what the exam is called?
The bar.
The bar exam. Okay. If you want to be a doctor, you also have to pass an exam. Do you know what they're called? The boards. The boards. So in order for you to be a lawyer, you have to pass the bar. If you never pass the bar, even though you went to law school, you could never be a lawyer. It's only when you pass the bar exam that you could be working as a lawyer. And the same thing with you could go to medical school, get your medical degree, but it's only when you pass the boards that you're certified to be a doctor and you could work as a doctor. That is not true in engineering. When you get your engineering degree, you can be an engineer and you can work as an engineer. However, in addition, you could become a licensed engineer. Just like when a lawyer passes the bar, he or she is now a licensed engineer. When a doctor passes a licensed lawyer. When a doctor passes the boards, she or he is a licensed doctor. You could work as an engineer, but you could maybe decide to become a licensed engineer, and you have to pass a couple of exams. Now, why would you become a licensed engineer? Well, if you design, you know how I mentioned to you, like the way you decide which field of engineering you want to design, the way you decide which field of engineering you want to go into, you think about what you want to design. If you want to design cars or skateboards, you go into mechanical. If you want to design chemical processing plants, you go into chemical engineering. It's very similar in determining on whether you're going to be licensed or not. If what you design fails and it could kill a lot of people, you're going to become a licensed engineer. So all civil engineers become licensed, all structural engineers become licensed, architectural engineers become licensed, aerospace engineers that are designing aircraft become licensed. So your goal is to become licensed. If you decide you're not going to be that kind of engineer and you're going to design things that are not going to kill a lot of people, then you don't need to become a licensed engineer. But I'm going to show you the process of becoming a licensed engineer. And the first step of it is to actually there are 2 exams you have to pass. The first exam is all material you learned in your freshman, sophomore, and junior and senior year of college. Mainly it's freshman, sophomore, junior. So you're still in engineering 5. Some of you are about to transfer, but you're going to be taking math. You're taking calculus, you're taking programming, you're taking physics, you're taking chemistry, you're taking statics, you're going to take materials, you're going to take circuits, you're going to take graphics, you're going to take CAD, you're going to take, now I'm going into junior level classes, engineering economy, dynamics, strength of materials, fluids, thermodynamics, circuits. So all those courses you're taking freshman, sophomore, and junior year. How well do you think you're going to remember that content 20 years from now? You're not going to remember it. You're only going to remember those things that you learned that you're still doing. So like, for instance, if I'm still using statics when I'm a civil engineer, which I would be, then I'm going to need to remember statics, and I'm going to remember it because I'm using it every day at work. I'm not going to remember any calculus. I'm never going to remember circuits ever again. So the first exam to become licensed covers all the material you learn in your freshman, sophomore, and junior year. So you should take that test regardless of whether you think you're ever going to be licensed or not. Take it when you're a senior, and everybody's going to be taking it at the same time. It's a grueling test. It's 8 hours long. It's all multiple choice, but take it. And if you fail it, you take it again. If you fail it again, you keep taking it till you pass it. And once you pass it, you now have passed that test. And then you could put it away. If you decide 20, 30 years from now, you want to be a licensed engineer, you would not have to take that first test again. You would only have to take a test in your major. So I'll repeat that, but I'm going to go to sharing the slides now. So can everybody see the slides? It says be a licensed
Yes.
professional engineer. Okay.
Yes.
So why do you get, so these words are synonymous. I can say I'm a licensed engineer. I can say I'm a professional engineer, or I can say I'm a registered engineer. All three of those are synonymous. Once you get your license in engineering, you could consider yourself a professional engineer and a registered engineer. Why registered? Because I'm registered for the state, with the state, as a professional civil engineer. I have a number and a stamp. Okay, why get registered? Well, it protects the public, ensures quality of work, it broadens your scope of responsibility. If you ever want to take on a government job, like let's say Santa Cruz, Santa Cruz County is going to be putting in a light rail on that train track that Pacific used to use. There are going to be mechanical and electrical engineers and probably civils designing it. It's a government job. They will only hire someone who's licensed. Why? Because the government does not want to hire someone that does not take liability. When you get licensed, you become liable and you have to have insurance. Okay. May be required for high liability positions, owning your own company. Okay. So there are three aspects. In order to become licensed or registered, you have to have education. And notice what it says here. You have to have a degree from an ABET accredited program. And that's why I talked to you about the importance of ABET. If you don't go through an ABET accredited program, it's as if you didn't go to school and you have to work a certain number of years more in that industry before they'll approve you. You have to have experience and you have to take exams. There are two exams. The first exam is the Fundamentals of Engineering exam, the FE exam. And the FE exam, you do not need any experience. You're going to take it when you're a senior. And the FE exam is the one I told you about. It's the one that covers all material from your freshman, sophomore, and junior level of school. So make a quick note for yourself that you need to take this exam when you're a senior. Okay? All right. Then you'll need some years of experience before you could sit for the second exam. And the professional engineering exam is specific for your major. So I could look at your majors. So Adam, you want to go into aerospace engineering. You would take the Aero PE exam. Carlos, you're interested in electrical. You would take the EE professional engineering exam. Jose, you're interested in biomedical devices. You would get the bioengineering, a biomedical engineering exam. Julio, you're interested in Ag-E. You would take the agricultural engineering exam. Okay, so you got it. You have to take two exams. The first one you should take right in your senior year and keep taking it until you pass. And then you take the PE after you have the experience. Okay, so here we just put the steps. First, pass the FE exam, graduate from a program, go to work with a registered engineer to get experience. You could take a review course if you want or study for it, and then you pass the test. And then you're a licensed engineer. In addition, if you go into geotechnical or structural engineering, you have to get a second licensing exam. You first have to be a civil engineer licensed. So, what do I suggest? I would suggest you don't study for either test. You go in and take the test. And if you pass, you never have to study. If you don't pass, then you study and take it. So I would go into the FE exam cold, blind. Don't study at all. Just take it. And if you pass it, you're done. But if you didn't pass it, then you're going to have to study for it or take a review course. And then for the PE exam, it's all specific to your field of engineering. So you're going to be more comfortable with that. There's not going to be any circuits questions on there for civil. There's not going to be any biomedical questions on there for a chemical engineer. So that one, you're going to kind of know that material more. Okay, and then here are some references for you. So I'm going to stop sharing for a moment. So one, you get licensed if you're going to be in a field of engineering where you're designing things where a lot of people could be killed. You might get licensed in other. So actually think about this. Let's say you're a mechanical engineer, you go to school for mechanical engineering, and you ultimately design HVAC, heating, ventilation, air conditioning in a building. Or you go to school for electrical engineering, and you decide you are going to be designing circuitry inside a building. A building can come down, and if a building comes down, everyone who did any design in that building will be sued. So a mechanical engineer who designs HVAC in a building needs to be licensed. An electrical engineer who designs circuitry in a building needs to be licensed. The civil engineer and structural engineer that built the building is licensed. Okay, so, but you may or may not know, other than that, other than those majors, you may not want to be licensed. You may never want to get licensed. Who knows? But you never know what your future is going to hold, whether you're going to own your own company or not. So the takeaway from this 10-minute discussion is take and pass that FE exam, because you do not want to take that in 20 years. You're not going to know anything. You're going to have to study so much. It's going to be like going back to school again. Too hard. Okay. What you're doing right now, your first 2 years of the engineering program, is the hardest. It's the hardest. Once you transfer, it's going to be easier. You are doing, when you take all the physics, chemistry, and math at the same time, that's the hardest thing you're doing right now. Once you get into the engineering classes, it's not as hard. Okay, I'm going to open the chat. Any questions? Any questions? I'm trying to look at the chat. Let me make it bigger. Okay. No questions. Okay, so I think this is the second break time. Okay, so it's a little bit before, hang on. I got to be in the right time zone for you guys. Okay, so it's a little before 1. So let's take a 15-minute break. Okay, 15 minutes. So come back at 1:15. Okay, and I'm going to take a water break too. Does anybody want to ask me a question? All right, I'm going to take a break then. Okay, everyone, I'm back from the break. We'll start in 1 more minute. Okay, it's 1:15. So I'm hoping everybody's back. Okay, in terms of options you have, you know that well, those of you who decide to go into engineering, you'll finish all your classes at Cabrillo, apply to a university and transfer to a university, and you'll be there 2 years. And then you'll get your bachelor's degree in engineering. And after you get your bachelor's, then you have a lot of options. I mean, you could work as an engineer if you want. You watched the video from Isadora, who got a bachelor's degree in chemical engineering, and now she's in sales. You could do technical sales. If you want to go into med school, you could go into med school. I mean, in fact, a bachelor's degree in biomedical engineering is the best way of getting you into medical school. I know a lot of engineers who actually got an engineering degree and then went to law school, and they're now patent attorneys. They are gearing people towards patents because they understand how technology works. So post-college options, you could go to medical school if you want. You could go to law school if you want. You could work as an engineer. You could go on and get an advanced degree. You could get a master's or a PhD, but I wouldn't suggest getting a master's until you know the specialty of the field of engineering you want to go into. And then also some people get their PE, they're licensed. So I was a civil and Phaedra was a civil. So we all went on, and Karen was a civil. We all went on and worked in engineering to get experience working under licensed engineer. And then we became licensed engineers. So there's a lot of options for you, and you don't have to stay working in engineering. You can do whatever you want, but the engineering degree got you to learn how to think logically, think critically, know how to do design, creative design, and it's really great skills for anything you want to do. I mean, in the end, I chose to go into teaching. If I wanted, I could teach at a university, but in order to teach at a university, I'd have to have a PhD. I have my license and I have a master's, so I could teach at a community college. But I wanted to teach at a community college because it's more geared towards teaching, where at a university, I have to do a lot more research. All right. So that's something I wanted to talk about today. Also, I mean, before we get on to the last topic of employment, I had asked a few weeks ago on what things you feel were missing from the class, and somebody said they wanted to learn more about environmental engineering. So I'm going to prepare some environmental engineering thing that you could do, but it'll be outside the element of the course. It'll not be a homework assignment or anything. I'll just prepare a presentation and give it to you guys, those of you that are interested in environmental. Someone else had asked about the legal aspects of engineering, and I feel like we've covered that now, knowing about licensing. And somebody had asked about entrepreneurship, and I really don't know a lot about that. And I would love to, and I will start researching it, but I may not have it together for this Engineering 5 class. All right, so where we're going now is I want to go back to share the screen, go to our module, and all the class notes, the only thing we have left now is engineering employment and outlook, which covers salaries and opportunities. And I wanted to just remind you that there is a homework 10 assignment, but it's optional. It's about engineering ethics, and it could replace a grade. And basically what I'm going to do is, let's say we have 9 homework assignments. Right now I'm going to grade it, average it at a 9. But what I'll do is I'll add in this 10th homework and still divide by 9. So if you missed a homework, you definitely should do it. If you got a poor grade on one of your homeworks, do it. But if you have a perfect homework score, you don't have to do it if you don't want to. And then there's a reminder on the interview project. You're going to present a highlight next week. The Mobile project, you're going to present your Mobile. And then this is your class reflection on what your plan is. So the only thing,
I'm sorry, are all 3 of those due next week?
yeah, yes. Why does this not say anything? It's weird that it doesn't say a date on it. Let's open it up. It says it's due here. So I don't know. Our last class is the 15th. I have no idea why it doesn't show up on when it's due. But they're all due the last day, because the last day of class, that's all we're doing in the class is you're going to present who you interviewed and some, highlight. You're going to introduce your mobile and show it, and then you're going to submit this. So I don't know why it doesn't say April on here, but why don't I just do this? Rather than trying to figure out all the technology. How's that look? Due at beginning of class 11 on April 11th, April 15th, okay? Okay, one thing I realized though is I didn't put in a discussion. And I want to have a discussion because there are times that some students can't come to class and they're watching the video, and I want them to be able to get credit for a discussion. So of all the things we've talked about today, social justice and all about ethics, what would you like me to put as the discussion? What would you like to do? Here are some options. One, would you like to read that complete article that Julia had about social? Oh, actually, I could give you an option. I could say either do this, this, or this, because either you could read that Julia's article on social justice, or you could read the article on the city court building, that whole story, and then just write 3 sentences or so. Why don't I do that? Why don't I make it an option? Okay? You guys?
Okay.
I think that's a good idea.
That sounds
Yeah.
good.
Sounds good.
Yeah, and Joanne, can I just pick your brain for another second on the projects due? 'Cause
Yeah.
The project 1 and project 3 are listed as the 12th due, and our next class is on the 15th. Do we need to turn those in ahead of time?
Yeah, you know how all your homeworks are always due on a Monday, and then you could
Right.
turn it in late on Tuesday or late on Wednesday? We're doing the same kind of thing.
Gotcha.
Okay, so if you turn it in, project 1 and project 3 are both written. So you're turning them in like the homeworks, and they're due on Monday, but if you turn it in on Tuesday or Wednesday, you get a point off for each day. The
Thank you for
mobile
clarifying.
is a physical thing. So you need to bring that to class.
Gotcha.
Should I say that?
Thank you for clarifying. I appreciate that.
How about that? Bring to class. All right. Okay, so I'm going to write up a discussion. I didn't write it yet. I figured I'd ask you guys, and I'll give you a few options, something like what Julia did, or reading the city court thing. I'll figure it out. Okay.
Yeah,
All
I
right.
think possibly for the social justice, just make write different options. Something that's indirectly causing something in social construct or something. Like, is this making a positive outcome or negative outcome? It could be something like you could choose.
Yeah, we could do that, certainly. I was thinking of, rather than you having to research stuff, I don't want to make it more time. I'd rather you just read something and then just write 3 sentences on it.
That works too, yeah.
Is that all right?
Joanne,
Yeah.
Adam suggested the challenger interview as well.
Oh, yeah. Great. All right, I'll write that down too. But I like what you're saying too, Louise Q, about picking a social justice item. Yeah, I'll just give you like 4 options. Read the social justice paper, read the challenger thing, read the city corp thing, or pick a social justice thing. All right?
Perfect.
Okay, great. All right, so I'm going to go now to engineering employment. Okay, so everybody can see where I am?
Yes.
Okay. All right, and I already opened it, so I'm going to open it up here. Okay, so there are 2 places that I know of that are pretty popular to find out information about salaries, job outlooks, etc. And one of them is for the United States. This is the main link for the United States in engineering. And this is the main one for California. So BLS stands for Bureau of Labor Statistics. And EDD, you might even have heard of EDD. They're also the organization that gives you unemployment checks. So they're looking, both of these things are all about labor markets. Okay. So if we go to this page, I'm going to just open it up. You'll notice that the first page, of course, they have occupations for everything. I mean, if your friends want to be a nurse, you could find on the Bureau of Labor Statistics, you could find nursing information. But this one is for the occupation of architecture and engineering. And you'll notice that there are all these occupations down here. And some of them you're going to notice are technician, right? So this is aerospace technician. This is an aerospace engineer. Here's a civil engineering technician. Here's a civil engineer. And what they do is they give you just a short sentence description of what the job's like. And then they tell you what degree you need. And notice that whenever you want to be a technician, you just need an AS degree. A regular engineering degree, you need a bachelor's. In fact, if you guys looked up physics or chemistry, a physicist or chemist, they'll say PhD here, not a bachelor's. And then they're giving you the median salary. So this is just a shortened page, but then you certainly could go deeper and find more information. But what I got, I'm going to a different page now. I'm going back to this page. Bakersfield College, a friend of mine teaches engineering at Bakersfield College, and her college put a kind of a summary together of engineering in the United States. So I thought we'd look at that. Hang on. Here. So this is basically the engineering page at Bakersfield College. And what they did is they actually put in salary information. So I thought it was pretty good. So this is general. So they're looking at what is the salary range for engineers. So the lowest salary you would be making as an engineer is $55,000, and the high is the 191. And of course, it depends on which field of engineering you're in and how many years of experience. This is not an entry-level salary, okay? But I would say that once you get a bachelor's degree in engineering, you're going to be making anywhere between 55 and 120,000 in your first year. Okay, then they're looking at job growth. Remember, all this information is on the Bureau of Labor Statistics site, but I just thought that since they have this here, it's kind of cool. So they're looking at growth in 10 years, that engineering is going to grow, the professions in engineering is going to grow by 8%. And then what they also had, I really liked, was they had the careers in aerospace. And if you keep going, they give you all the different. So let's just look at the starting salary. So for aerospace, 72,000 you start with, ag 57, biomedical 55, chemical 56, civil 62, electrical 66. Wait, hang on a second. What's the difference here? Electrical engineer 66. They excluded computer engineering. I know it's a little bit higher. All others. Let's see, that's it. Oh, environmental 61. Health and safety engineers. So those would be more industrial engineers. Oh, here's industrial. So these must be industrial engineers that are working in the area of health and safety, probably in factories. Marine and naval engineers, materials engineers, what was that? That was mechanical. But remember, what's this data? Is this California data or is this US federal data? You guys? Do you remember? It's from the Bureau of Labor. It's federal. It's federal. So that means they're averaging in what somebody makes in Fresno, what somebody makes in Missouri, what somebody makes in Ohio. Your salary in the Silicon Valley is going to be higher than the salary that they have listed here. Nuclear engineers 91, petroleum 88, aerospace 72. We're going back to the beginning. Okay. So I'm going back to here. Is everybody at the slide I'm at? You're going to have an opportunity to look at this stuff in a little bit. Just hang with me, please. So do you agree? I'm going to stop sharing for a minute. Do you agree that salary is going to be a function of which engineering degree you have, right? Which industry you work in, and your location, right? A lot of mechanical engineers want to work in the bicycle industry. So the bicycle industry doesn't pay that well because a lot of people want to work in it. If you have a mechanical engineer, but you work in another industry, like in Silicon Valley in the computer industry, you're going to make more than if you work at Specialized Bikes, right? If you work in Silicon Valley or Santa Cruz, you're going to make more. Well, actually, if you work in Silicon Valley, you'll make more than if you work in Santa Cruz. But money isn't everything. Remember, if you have to drive the hill, you have to have a good car and you're going to pay more gas, right? Plus, it's going to take another hour out of your work day, 2 hours actually, hour over the hill, hour back, right? So you're not just determining where can I make the most money, it's going to where you're going to have the better life. If you work in a place where the housing market is really low, like Missouri or Ohio, then you are not going to make as much money, but your housing is going to be cheaper. Okay, but I wanted to give you some statistics. Any questions? Any comments, anything in the chat? No. Okay. So now let's look at, I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. And now I want to look at employment in California. So here's the website, and then it said, and then I wrote, then search by engineering discipline. And California pays better than a lot of other places. So now I'm at the California EDD, right? So now what I said was do a search. So let's do a search for, let's say aerospace engineering. Let's say aerospace engineer. Okay, detail occupational guide for aerospace. So I click on this. And then, what would I do? Fine, we could read that. Tools and technology, green, tasks I might have to do, working conditions, will the job fit me? Okay, this is what I wanted to say. Okay, what's the salary? So just in California, the low salary is $98,000. What was the low salary in the federal government? Was it 71 for Aero or 67? So you could see in California, you start making $30,000 more than at the United States overall. And then what is the job outlook? In California, the percent change for aerospace engineering is 9%. So it's larger than the federal average of all engineers. Got it? Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing. So what I want to do for the next 30 minutes is put you in breakout rooms based on your field of engineering. And then I want you to do some searches and look at the job outlook, look at job outlook federally, look at it in a state. If you know you want to live, I remember Reed, was it Reed? I think it's Reese. Reese in the other class, Reed, you'll have to tell me if I'm correct or not. Reese wants to live in Colorado. So he's going to look up some Colorado site to find out what the salaries are and the job outlook there. Reed, is that right? You're not, no, you're interested in mechanical.
Yeah.
Okay. So for the next 30 minutes, then we're going to be in our breakout room. And besides you doing that, I want you to just network with the other students that have similar engineering interests as you for the next 30 minutes to talk to each other. So I'm going to create breakout rooms, and let me do this. I'm gonna assign manually. Oops. Hang on. And I'm gonna make 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 rooms. Add a room, add a room, add a room. Okay, I wonder if I could change the name. Oh yeah, rename. Good. So room 1 is for civil. Room 2 rename. Civil, I'm going to put structural engineers because there were a number of you that wanted more structural than just plain civil. That rename. Okay, mechanical. Arrow. Sorry, it takes time for me to do this. Mechanical, automotive, because there are a number of you that were interested in automotive. So I want to separate you out because there'll just be so many people. I'd rather not have too many people in a room. Rename room 6 will be electrical. And room 7 is going to be computer engineering. Okay, so for 1, assign. So for civil, Aiden doesn't look like he's here. Alex, Jason's not here. Oscar. Okay, for the second one, for structural, Jasmine's not here. Sam and Kevin. Okay. Mechanical, Cody, Luis Q, and Zane. For Arrow, I have Adam and Nathan. And for automotive, I have Reed and Angel and Thomas, not here. And then room 6, I have Carlos, Ulysses, Louis C, Ruben's not here, and Julio. And then computer engineering, Brandon, Cameron. Hang on a sec. Biomedical. And Jason. Civil. Okay. Jason. And then Jose, I know you're interested in biomedical. I think I'm going to put you in the mechanical room, okay?
Yeah, I think that's the best option since that's the degree I'm going for.
Yeah, okay, great. All right, everybody sees what rooms they're in now? So do you want to change? Are you okay with the rooms I have for you? Okay, so if you're not happy with the room I have for you, let me know, but I'm going to open all the rooms now, okay? And then we'll just come back together around, well, I guess that took me a long time. Sorry about that. I'm going to give you a little over 20 minutes. Okay. Okay, so I think everyone's back now. You know, the fact that we only have one more class, I'm glad that we have an opportunity to kind of get those of you who are interested in similar fields of engineering together. You're going to see each other in future classes. And yeah, so let me share my screen. What I did while you guys were gone is I created a discussion 10 and I called it Social Justice and Ethics. And if you open it, it says read or watch one of the following articles or videos and then write a 1 paragraph, 4 to 5 sentences about how it conveyed to you why social justice and or ethics are important to you as a future engineer. So the whole social justice article was the one that Julia gave us. The Citicorp article is the one that I put on here. And then the Challenger disaster video is what Cody gave us. So, oh, actually, well, Luis, you had mentioned, I think I would rather keep it like this. You guys, rather, Luis, you had mentioned something else.
Yeah,
The
yeah, no
main
worries.
reason- The main reason for the discussion is so that those who are watching the class outside of class time get some more details. So I'm going to keep it like this. And it's due, so let's go back to the module. It doesn't say the due date either. Why is that happening? I have the due date in here. I don't know. Well, if there are any issues to it, well, then certainly I'll hear from you. So I'll just assume it's okay right now. Let me move your pictures out of the way. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing and basically any questions? Any questions at all? Anything you want to share with us that you learned at the time you were in your breakout room? All right, I think that we could call it a day then. And I'll see you next week at 11:10. And I'll be back home in California then.
Thanks,
Okay, so
Joanne.
you guys
Safe
have a good week.
travels.
Okay, what was that, Luis?
Yeah.
Safe travels.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks.
Thanks, Joanne.
Okay, bye.
All
See
right,
you
thank you,
guys.
Joanne. See ya.
Okay, bye.
Actually, Joanne, I had a quick question.
Yeah, hey, Angel.
So I believe for the interview, the person you paired me with, I think his name's Tony. He never responded back.
Okay, but it was Antonio, right?
Yeah, Antonio.
Right, but then I put you in touch with someone else. Did they not contact
Oh,
you either?
No, I haven't gotten any emails. Right. So I
Let
know
me,
it's.
let
But
me,
I mean,
let me get in my email, okay? Hang on a second.
okay.
Julio, what's your email address again?
It's A Morales,
Okay, hang on.
156.
I got it. Okay, hang on. Oh, I had sent you an email that said, can you come to my office hours tomorrow to talk about another engineer to interview? So let me find you someone now, okay?
Okay.
All right, so hang on. And you're interested in mechanical, right?
Yeah.
Just hang on, okay?
Yeah, no.
Okay. You could, Ma, you could come in. Okay, Angel, I just sent you an email connection with a student named Dagoberto. He goes by Dago. And he came to Cabrillo, went into mechanical engineering, transferred to Sac State, and he's actually got his master's and working on his PhD.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I just sent him an email with you an email too.
Okay.
So because we only have 1 week left, Angel, tomorrow, I want you to give Dago, what's today, Thursday?
Yeah.
I want you to give him 1 day to contact you.
Okay.
If by Friday afternoon he doesn't contact you, send him an email and say, hi, Dago, Joanne suggested I contact you. I'd love to meet with you, okay?
Okay.
But give him till like contact him by like 4 p.m. tomorrow.
4 p.m. tomorrow. All right then.
Okay, great.
Okay. Thank you so much,
All right,
Joanne.
thanks. Okay, bye, Angel.
All right. See you.